Okay, welcome. This is the Cincom Smalltalk 2018 ESUG presentation. My name is Arden Thomas. I'm the Cincom Smalltalk product manager. One thing Suzanne said recently is that whether you've been using Smalltalk for decades or you're brand new or you've never heard of Smalltalk, we want to talk to you. And that's how we feel. We welcome the opportunity anytime to talk to people, especially people who've never heard of Smalltalk. That's a wonderful situation. So we're always happy to engage, especially new people, to tell them about the wonderful world of Smalltalk. This is a picture of Cincom headquarters, and that's of significance because we're really proud. This is our 50th year celebration for the company. And the company, Cincom is the largest private software company, or the oldest private software company in the United States. They started 50 years ago, largely with database management systems. They were very early on in relational database technology, and they did a few really smart things, we think, with Smalltalk. In 1995, they acquired ObjectStudio, and in 1999, they acquired VisualWorks from ObjectShare. They made some other smart moves. They basically came up with a sustainable business model to keep it in business and keep Smalltalk, the commercial model moving forward and employing lots of Smalltalkers. So I think they made some really smart decisions. They recognized what a lot of other companies didn't, the value of Smalltalk, and went forward with it. So today's agenda is going to be a little atypical from my typical ESUG presentation. We'll talk a little bit about the product at the end, but want to focus a little more on how we see things with Smalltalk advocacy. And also we'll try to have a little fun. So first I want to talk to you about some themes. I was thinking about this, well, how do we better promote Smalltalk? And isn't this promoting something, isn't that a really old problem? And this song verse stuck in my head, and I was like, well, where does that song come from? This predates Smalltalk by decades. Probably everyone here, I don't think I see any octogenarians in the audience. Pentagenarian here. Occasionally I know we have some sexagenarians, which is not what you think, unless you think that's somebody in their 60s, which is correct. So this is actually a jazz standard, this song, from 1944, won an Academy Award in 1945, and if you want to hear a more modern cover of it, if you go to YouTube, you can find a more recent version by Paul McCartney and Diana Krall. Diana Krall is a wonderful jazz singer and musician. So yes, we've got to focus on what are the positive aspects of Smalltalk, and of course eliminate the negative by educating them as to their perceptions, and also eliminating negative aspects of our Smalltalk products. Another theme, and I thought this was appropriate, especially given the venue here. Does anybody know who that is? It's Leonardo da Vinci. One of my favorite quotes of his is, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication," which is certainly true, and of course I think a really important part of what makes Smalltalk so capable. Some other things that I thought were good ideas. I've read some good books over time, and I'd like to try to tie these ideas to Smalltalk. Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for this body of work. This is a really interesting research, and this book is very interesting on thinking fast and slow, which is basically quick, intuitive decisions are very low cost, and slow, deliberate thinking is biologically expensive. And we want to save that for important things. and use the quick thinking when we can. It's what we naturally do as people. Another thing, simple rules. A lot of this is about how some very simple, obvious rules can be as good or even better sometimes than very complex systems. One example of that is years ago, BMW, the car maker, they wanted a better way to know when to change the oil in your car. So they came up with a very sophisticated system, had lots of sensors that would do particular measurements on the oil and feed them in and do some number crunching and tell you whether you needed to change your oil or not. And it was expensive. There were lots of sensors and lots of pieces that could easily break. They eventually got rid of that and replaced it with basically just a counter of how many times the engine has turned over. And that measurement was almost as good and far less complicated and far less expensive and far less likely to break than the very complicated system. Another just quick example is if in the American sport of baseball, the outfielder may occasionally get a fly ball, a ball hit high into the air, and he needs to get underneath where that ball is going to land and catch it. And that's intuitive if you've done it. If you practice for a little bit, you'll immediately, intuitively, and you may not, the interesting thing is you may not even realize what you're doing. But we know the outfielder doesn't get out a calculator and get the velocity and the trajectory and figure out which grid to go on and run over there. No. He looks at it, and basically the algorithm is that he looks at the ball and then moves to that ball so that the angle he has is constant. And if he maintains that constant angle, when it comes down, he'll be right under it. And now, if you ask an outfielder that, they probably won't tell you, they won't explain it to you like that, but that's what they're doing intuitively. That's what we intuitively learn. So I think it's interesting and insightful to look at things like that. Last, flow. Flow is basically about the state. This is often with extreme sports where not paying attention can be literally life and death. Flow is intense focus and productivity. And again, I'll try to relate things with all of these to Smalltalk. I think we can see what it is for there. So some Smalltalk advocacy. Some of my own understanding of this is, like a lot of people here, we've been working with Smalltalk for a long time. And we get some more insights and things when we think about things over that long period of time. Part of my career, I worked for running development for a hedge company, and when the hedge company went belly up, I came back to the group, passionate group of small talkers who are now at Cincom. And one of the first assignments I had was sales basically said, give us some new ideas to help sell Smalltalk. What's good about it? What's different? How do we talk to people about it? Give us some education. And I wrote up, basically created a list and some documentation for them. And one of the salespeople said, I think of that as the pearls of Smalltalk, and that name is kind of stuck. So the pearls of Smalltalk, and here's basically the list I'll talk to. The first thing about what's different, and I mean, I know a lot of this is, we're all really familiar with this, but sometimes when we're talking to new people, we need to step back and think, well, wait a second, I understand this because I've been working with it for a while, but that is not their understanding. So we want to be very careful and deliberate about how we try to convey what we love about it. So with Smalltalk, one of the big differences, I think, is the time and investment that Xerox PARC put into creating this language. They had a long stretch of time. They were making lots of money from their copiers and patents, and they just poured that into with a bright group of people. No demands for product. no demands for supporting, the next generation. Every 2 years, what did Alan Kay say? Burn the disk packs. Throw it all out. Take the ideas you learned, and let's start clean sheet again and again and again. And what really underscores that is I often see things like a language, maybe like Java, and they're talking to the developers, say, we really could have made this area a lot better, but we had a week and a half to do this really important thing. That was like the time slot that they had, because they had to make it and rush it out the door. I think when I was looking at some of these things, I even saw Alan Kay was speaking. He said, the group they had developing that was a really bright, capable group. Too bad they didn't have more time to really do it right. Well, they had that time at Xerox PARC, and I think they did some fantastic things. I like to say that languages like Lisp and Smalltalk, 50 years from now, they'll still be here because of this investment and the value of what was created. Elegance, productivity. I saw in one of the earlier presentations, productivity, like the real estate, location. Productivity is really important. One of the things we often get is customers coming to that, and they say, well, that's wonderful that the vendor of Smalltalk is telling us how productive this is, but who else says so? So it's nice that there's things like the Capers-Jones Institute. They regularly compile a list and show in terms of function points how productive a language and some other technologies is. And basically and consistently, Smalltalk comes out as the most productive general purpose language. And that satisfies a big need of customers or potential customers who want to look at this technology. You're telling them how productive it is, really prove it. Who else says so? Who else not doing Smalltalk says this? And there is a source. Elegance. Smalltalk is very succinct, very expressive. It's beautiful. As the previous speaker noted, beauty is really important. And that also ties in with the later one, enjoyment. They need to enjoy it. They need to love it, to do well. But part of the elegance and the simplicity, it really compounds itself. It compounds itself because it means less code. Less code means it's easier to understand. It also means lower maintenance, lower costs, all around. So some simple ideas really compound themselves into value over time when you look at them. Pioneering. I love when people ask, well, what do you do? And they're not involved with computers at all. But most people use a computer. So I get to tell them a little bit about how basically the work that I do with Smalltalk, that was the language that kind of was part of or near the beginning tenets of all we have today, the graphical user interface, drag and drop, the office metaphor, files, folders, etc. All that was done back at Xerox PARC. So it really, people, their response is almost always, wow, I had no idea. And they think this is some wonderful thing, and we know it is. And they'd never heard of it. Portability. Portability was one important aspect of our product, and that the bottom line there is that it reduces the liability of somebody choosing Smalltalk, because now if all of a sudden the company makes a different platform than standard, you're already there, or it's very easy to move to. Full source code. I think this is a piece that we perhaps undersell, in that Smalltalk is written in Smalltalk and you get all the source code. And I think the pragmatic side of that is the customer is never stuck. If they're using Microsoft things and they want some custom thing, they might have a really hard time convincing Microsoft to build this. if really they're the only ones that are interested. It's a one-off thing for them, but they really want it, they really need it. Well, with this technology, of course, they can build it themselves. They've got all the source code. With our products, that includes VM source code. If they want something specific that will really benefit them, maybe it's a huge leg up on competition. If they have this one thing, they can build it. They can build it. Enjoyment. Enjoyment, I think we know, and part of the reason the enjoyment is because how productive the technology is, how much you can get done, how much you can stay in the flow of things and get things done without losing your train of thought. And I think that's a key part of the productivity of Smalltalk. You don't have to shift gears and then come back and say, oh, wait a second, where was I? What was I doing? You just stay in the constant productivity flow state. Broad applicability, that it's a general purpose language. You can use it for most things. So that was kind of some of the understanding and some of what I told sales about what was different 12 years ago. Some of my conclusions. I think certainly we've seen more dynamic languages gain traction. Things like Python are widely accepted and used now. 50 years from now, again, Smalltalk is still going to be there. It had a massive investment in doing something right. And few languages get that. They try to learn something, but they're often rushed out the door, and they suffer because of that. Hidden gems. If you follow any of our digests and such, our mailing lists, I put out a screencast each month called Hidden Gems. And the whole idea of Hidden Gems is to show you capabilities of the product that may not be obvious. And if you don't know about them, we think you should know them. Of course, there are things that lots of people do know about, but maybe some aspect they haven't seen. One of the nice things is working with a lot of bright people in Smalltalk. You pick up little tips and some of the things like, oh, I never realized you could do that. So we want people to know those things. Another thing, if a person, even an experienced Smalltalker, hasn't done this particular thing before, or the person's brand new to Smalltalk and trying to get up to speed very quickly, we know that doing something in Smalltalk is really, really easy if you have an example. So you're looking at a new API, the first thing you might do is, well, where else is this used? So you can see an example. I mean, it may not be for trivial things, but if it's a more complex or multi-step thing, have an example really get you up and running very quickly. So that's kind of the whole thinking fast and slow. I can spend lots of time and deliberately figure this out, or if I have an example, I can just start being productive immediately. So part of Hidden Gems is to give examples where people may not have worked with something like that before. So what are some things that we've done? Some basic things like environment tips and tricks. One of my favorites is filtering the browser to just show your body of code so you can find your stuff really quickly and easily. Of course, it's just a button click to get to everything in a full browser, but often, right, if your stuff is interspersed through this large body of code, it's so nice to have just everything in one small subset. Tabs are a great way of solving the age-old problem of having too many windows open. The right shortcut keys to use to navigate quickly, keep that flow state. Some frameworks we've talked about. I remember when I was first starting with Smalltalk, one of the first things that took some time and deliberate learning was the model view controller and learning to do graphics. This was Smalltalk V in 1985. But so I give some examples of doing this and doing some custom drawing. Now, a person wanting to do that, you can get started really, really quickly and easily. A couple of other things here and some insights. Value interface is a framework that I've used. It was actually developed years ago. I ended up using it at the hedge fund where I worked. I didn't have time to develop my own. Would have loved to do that, but it's like, we need this right now. And a friend of mine had developed this, and I was familiar with it. Here was the funny thing, though. Yeah, I was familiar with this. I knew how it worked. I knew how it was put together. I thought I knew the value, but I really didn't. So when we chose this and started using it, it was suddenly a light bulb moment that, wow, if you start using this at scale, it really starts to show you some value. So here, I thought I knew this. You know, that's one of the things that no matter what age we are, we always can't assume we know it all, because there's things that we don't know, insights that we don't have, new tips and tricks we can learn from anyone. So here for me was using this thing I was already familiar with, and it just stunned me with how useful it was when you started to use it in scale. So I was very surprised that it hadn't taken off more, or more people weren't using it, or maybe trying to just convey the value better. I developed Domain Master, kind of a work in progress, to take using Pareto's law, take the most valuable pieces of it and embed that in Domain Master, and maybe change up the API, make it more understandable, easier to use, easier to approach, or at least convey its value more easily. Well, what it does basically allows you to take lots of little mini applications, and you can put them together into a bigger cohesive application with usually like one line of code to embed them in a new application. So it can be extremely productive and a lot of fun, really enjoyable when you figure this out and start putting things in. Another one was on parsing. We basically took you through building a brand new parser, a JSON parser from the railroad track diagrams. And we also then showed how to use the JSON parser that we have in the product. So why did we show how to do the one basically built from scratch? Well, you might want to build one that you need to customize. You might have a different syntax. You might just be interested on how to do this stuff in general. So it's a simple, quick example that lays out how to get started with this very quickly and easily with an example. Did some examples with HTTPS on how to order the encryption handshake that the end party is looking for, and how to find that out too. Also to do some screen scraping. But some of the nicest hidden gems were ones that bring it all together, where it's built in Domain Master. It does some screen scraping, or uses a REST API to bring in some JSON, uses the parser, presents some graphical information using model view control. So just tying all the pieces together in one cohesive thing that makes sense is a lot of fun. And I think underscores the value. Very rewarding. Okay, vocabulary. So here's some other ideas with vocabulary. Words are really important. They convey meaning. And we want to be very careful about how we can try to convey the value of Smalltalk. So Smalltalk, it's something good to us, right? But one of the definitions is polite conversation about things that are unimportant. That's not really a word association that we want people to think of, right? I mean, the people who name that, and this is no denigration on the people who name Smalltalk. I think it's a clever idea. But I remember in the 80s when I first heard of Smalltalk. Well, wait a second. Smalltalk is software, right? Software, okay. So what software was around back? I know when I first heard about it, there were things like Crosstalk and FastTalk, and these were telecommunication packages. So I heard Smalltalk software. I said, oh, that must be a compact telecommunications bundle. Maybe I should look that up so I can use it with my new modem. Okay, but it's not at all. That's what it implied in context at that time. So we want to be careful. We want to be deliberate. You know, we know it's a great language. Was it too clever a name? Maybe. Why discuss it? Because we want to bring this to brand new people. And one of the things is, you know, I say small talk means something good to us, but let me suggest something that we all eat things, and we probably all eat vegetables because we know that vegetables are good for us, right? What if a study came out while we're at the ESUG conference here this week, a study came out that said if you eat broccoli 3 times a week, it'll boost your IQ 10 points and you'll live 15 years longer. Wow. But you have to do it consistently, regularly, and these were conclusive reports. Broccoli is kind of a funny name, but we'd start thinking, broccoli, you know, this great, wonderful name. We'd eat, you know, and this I know this is true from other things in my own personal experience. We'd start eating broccoli, and suddenly the taste would be wonderful. It would happen, right? Because you'd start eating it to get these wonderful benefits, and so your whole perception of it would change. And I think that's what has happened. I know it's happened with me, and probably most people here, or a lot of people here. Small talk is like this. Yeah, it's great. Small talk. It's not this, you know, unimportant conversation. But to somebody who's never heard of it, they don't have that. They don't have that wonderful perception that we do. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that, and hopefully get them to that point where they're saying, yeah, small talk, yes, it's a wonderful thing. Another word, proselytize. Usually it's trying to, often used in the context of converting a person from one religion to another. And I remember even at ParcPlace in the 90s with sales, trying to convert somebody from the language they love to small talk was about as easy as converting their religion. And the thing that we really want to make sure that we do is don't tell them, well, if you don't use small talk, you're just not very smart. That's not the approach. What we want to do is invite them. And I think what a better approach is, say it's a Python user. Python is very popular. Is that you can suggest that learning small talk, the original object-oriented programming, will make you a better Python programmer. It'll make you better. It's not saying Python is garbage, you should use this instead. It's saying learn this also, and you'll be better at doing what you love now. And we know that over time, if we expose enough people to it, some people it's just going to click, it's going to resonate, and they're going to love and want to use small talk all the time, or at least talk wonderfully about it with wonderful praise. So we want to invite people. We'll make them better, in most cases, at what they do now. One of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein, and this is probably, looking at the history of this, is probably a paraphrase, but everything should be as simple as it can be, but not simpler. And again, one of the really powerful things about small talk is the simplicity of the language. And that brings me to another point. Okay, we have to be careful with simple. One of the definitions of simple on the bottom here is lacking in knowledge or expertise. Or we saw Leonardo's quote, it's the ultimate sophistication. Well, simple also means very unsophisticated. So we want to be careful how we communicate that it's simple. I remember in the 90s trying to tell people about the simplicity of small talk. They'd say, so it's like Visual Basic, and rather than grabbing my hair and running screaming from the room, you'd say, well, what do you think is a really powerful language? And it's like C. Well, imagine the power of C, but the ease of use of Visual Basic, and that's closer maybe. Small talk is really succinct. It's brief and clearly expressed. We certainly want all the code that we write in Smalltalk to be like that. And of course, the first definition of simple here is more towards what we want to accurately convey. On some of our calls, our conference calls at Cincom with the Smalltalk developers, one of the engineers over in Europe here often likes to bring up this next quote, so I had to look it up. It's actually by the American author Mark Twain, and it's, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead." And I think that it's a really relevant idea to Smalltalk in that it takes a lot of time and investment and deliberation to make something simple. I mean, often when you look at the end result, you say, "Oh, well, that's simple and obvious. So what?" It's like, no, you don't understand. Making it simple and obvious, taking something complex and making it simple and obvious is hard work. It's hard work. And we want people to appreciate that. That's like the Smalltalk language. It was a lot of work to make it things simple and obvious. We also want to work on principles of the language, principles of Smalltalk, and not only state the principles, but walk them forward, connect the dots. So we know the language design of Smalltalk, simplicity. Again, be careful of the perception. It removes a lot of unneeded fluff, which is good and productive. So one of the principles is Smalltalk is a small number of very consistently applied concepts. And that's really positive, that's really powerful. It multiplies itself over time. But you don't want to just mention that, you want to walk that forward. Well, what does that give you? Well, I can express something more clearly and with less code most of the time. Okay, now they see the value in it. What else? You can also strongly influence how it reads. You can take something and write it in Smalltalk, and you can show it to a domain expert who doesn't code, doesn't know Smalltalk, and they can probably understand it if it's well written. What else? Another related things. Alan Kay said simple things should be simple, complex things should be possible. And that is, because of these initial principles, you can get your arms around more difficult problems. Another point is, and that's important to a lot of developers, you also want to mention it lowers your costs. Because there's a guy in the room that funds all this, and that's what lights his ears up. That's what gets his attention. Another thing about this, you can get your arms around larger problems. Suzanne and I have talked to customers over the years. If we had a nickel for every time, I'm sure there's something you could say funny there. A lot of times people are pressured to move away from Smalltalk. They're told by the new management comes and says, "Oh, well, we're going to use flavor of the month language, and we're going to move everything to that." And so we get people coming to us saying, "We love Smalltalk, but new management says you're going to do this," and they begin this long, big project to move it over, and then and we know why. We know why it fails, because if it's a large, complex problem that they got their arms around in Smalltalk, when they move to a less elegant, less sophisticated language, all of a sudden they can't contain it anymore. So often we get at our door and we say yes, and they say, "Oh, well, we want to re-up our licensing because that project, we spent more money trying to port it to this new, latest, greatest language than it cost to develop it in the first place, and it still doesn't work right." So this is an important thing about Smalltalk. I want to mention a thought exercise. And one of the things that we do is describing how do you describe Smalltalk to a non-Smalltalker. Smalltalkers. So here's one idea. Imagine going to a movie theater 50 years from now. How will the technology have changed? Like with all the new things going on in VR, well, maybe you go to theater, maybe you won't even go to a theater. I'm not sure what it'll be like, but you go into a movie maybe, and instead of just sitting back in a chair, sitting back in a chair and just watching the movie, you'll be in the movie. You'll interact with the characters. You'll get to relive these incredible historical events maybe. Think about what that might mean to you, how much of an impact, how wow that is. Maybe you can change the direction of the conclusion of the movie by interacting. It could be a really, really incredible experience, right? Probably imagine something, maybe approaching, going more towards the holodeck from Star Trek. Something incredible, way ahead of what we have now. But what if we were taking some of those ideas and apply them to a modern, a current computer language? What would we want? We want to be able to go into the code, execute it right there, see the results immediately, change the results if we want to try something else, change the code and immediately retry it. It's like, well, wait a second, this is what we have now. This is Smalltalk. I mean, it's no surprise to any of us here, but I don't think a lot of people really understand that difference with Smalltalk. They don't. It may be one of those things they know, or it could even be you tell them they know it, but until they've worked with it and tried it and had that light bulb moment, they really don't get it. So again, like location, 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 and productivity, productivity, productivity. We have live coding, live coding, live coding. Maybe debugger is a bad term. People know what it is. Debugger is usually a bad thing in other languages. For us, it's not. I was working all day. I was in the debugger. It was awful. It was terrible. Glad this day is finally over. Or Smalltalk, you're like, I spent the day in the debugger. Wow. It's a wonderful experience. And I don't think people appreciate it enough. Also, this is a big reason for the flow state, getting into the flow state, where you run the code, look at the result. It's not right. You change the code. You try in a tight loop. So you're boom, 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 lots of iterations very quickly. Whereas if you slow down those iterations, now you've lost your train of thought. You've lost your, and now it's a lot more time. So there's so much to get by this focus and this moving forward without stopping. The development at the speed of thought, I like to say. Another thing, with the last presentation that we saw, I think we saw the presenter was really excited because what he was doing was saying we're taking this kind of thing which we get excited about as Smalltalkers and kind of taking it to another level, another area. And probably if you took those things and had a great area and a great solution and worked with it, you'd be like, wow. And that light bulb would go off. Sometimes you have to work with it to really, really appreciate what the value is. Finally, we as Smalltalk vendors, I know we love all Smalltalks. Of course, we love and promote our Smalltalks. We are positive towards all Smalltalks. Many of you probably remember Alan Knight. He used to actually work and run our engineering group a number of years ago. And I used to come with him to these ESUGs together. I remember one time he said, it's like the Smalltalk vendors are all in a rowboat together. And we can hit each other over the head with paddles, or we can all row together. That was a very, very colorful explanation. But we want to all row together because the big thing that we're working against is trying to get so many new developers. They never heard of Smalltalk. They have no idea. They have no idea all the investment in these things that basically invented or pioneered all that we have today. They have no idea about that. So we want to bring new people in. We want to communicate these benefits, because there's so much of this that it hasn't clicked, it hasn't resonated. They don't understand these benefits as we understand them. A little information on products. You may remember this from last year, how we're basically making our foundation larger and larger. That supports our two products. And the direction is this. We're going to bring the products together. And I'm really excited about this, because what it means is that if, say, like you're an ObjectStudio customer, and this customer that you built this application for needs it to run on Linux, this opens up opportunities. If you saw some of the mapping tools and such in ObjectStudio, and you want to use those in your VisualWorks environment, so this will open up a whole lot of doors for sharing. And of course, it's a smart way to move forward to one common product for us as well. So a few directions. What we've been doing, we've been working a lot. We've made a lot of big changes to some big frameworks. We've been refining them. We've been working with customers. Customer wants to move forward, and they made some customizations, or one seldom used piece doesn't work. So we've been working with customers and fixing those things and getting them built into the maintenance releases. But our general future direction is for incremental improvements, and we have a strong understanding and eye on compatibility and moving forward. I always say to engineering, if you make the customer change their code, you have to make it worth it. We don't want changes for change's sake. We've been doing a number of infrastructure upgrades, particularly in the GUI. Part of that is getting rid of some old baggage, reducing some technical debt. Another part is because of the integration of version 9, come out with a combined painter for the two products, and we want to get all the infrastructure ready for that. Mentioned we've been working with customers to understand their specific instances if they have any issues moving to one of the new releases. And of course, with the whole flow state of things, improving productivity where we see opportunities, and improving the API, because that's another one of the things with Smalltalk, because Smalltalk is written in Smalltalk. One of the things that going out and talking to customers over time came to the realization that almost all large customers customized the development environment. So you can customize things for your applications, you can customize the development environment. Of course, if you want and get a big benefit out of having the development environment or how you build and produce your product work a very, very specific way that is a huge benefit for you, you can do that. And of course, it's really important if you have the right API into those things to help them be able to do that. So instead of just doing things interactively, you can set up a script that maybe runs, pulls code from almost, like what I use as a script to every week our build is to pull a number of pieces in from a number of different sources and basically build an image with all these test things in and set it up and change the font and set all these parameters automatically, and it just runs. You just click a button and it works, rather than spending 15 to 30 minutes doing that every week. Just does it. So of course customers do the same kind of things for their very specific needs. If you ever, I left this in from last year, I'm sorry, I get a small chuckle out of this. If you ever worked with IBM manuals or at IBM, you'll get this. And finally, I want to say, thank you very much, and here's where you can contact us if you have any questions. And finally, here's Tom Neese, the company founder and owner, welcoming a couple new small talkers to the fold. Thank you very much, and any questions? Christian.
So I moved my main product now from 7.10 to 8.3.1, and it has been really difficult. One thing is the data set. So the question is, what has been the progress over the last year for the grid? Second question is, there's still a calendar widget missing. Is there any plan to build one? And the third question is, the layout system of the UI has changed twice, actually, in the time between 7.10 and now. Will there be documentation on the new system? Thank you.
Yes.
Arden.
So one second. So your first question on the data set? Yeah, that's on the. Actually, you can look at the person right behind you. She has a list of things that I've identified with some things that we need, and we need extra attention to these things, and that we're going to bring to upper management to say, here's some things people are asking
highest
for.
priority 10 years ago, you said, when widgetry was buried, you said the next thing will be the grid. That was 10 years ago. What is the progress?
We actually have a grid. It was.
It's not working in the actual world.
It was always inferior to the data set. So.
This is really bad.
It's still on the list, data set 2. And I hear you and I agree with you.
Oh, thank you.
I hear you and I agree with you. The second thing, I think on the information that Suzanne has under data set 2, it says date picker. I mean, literally. Yeah.
Right.
Is a thing, we need, because one of the things we've been so involved with fixing and improving the infrastructure is that we'd stopped, and what I want to fix this is stop producing new widgets that we think people want. People want. And your third question was
documentation on the new layout system, which looks interesting, constraint-based, wonderful, but no documentation whatsoever.
And the answer is yes, we plan to have some documentation on that. Elliot, did you have a question?
Yes, you'll forgive me because I have skin in this game. I joined ParcPlace in 95 and was part of the team that was acquired by Cincom in 99 and left in 2007 after some interesting experiences. This talk was titled Cincom Smalltalk Plan. I didn't see any plan.
No.
And you talked of participating in movies in which you could change the ending. It seems clear to me that Cincom will play no part in the development of Smalltalk.
Well, let me address some of that. I can't address all of that, but I can address some. In that, with the Cincom Smalltalk products, the majority of the revenue goes back into the Cincom Smalltalk team. I think one of the biggest things is we employ a lot of Smalltalk developers. That still hasn't changed. The cast of characters changes over the time. Suzanne and I fight vigorously to try to increase the Smalltalk employment at Cincom and highlight the value and the benefits and what people want. Sometimes management says, "Hey, everything's working. Well, we can just quiet things down." I'm like, "No, we want to keep improving this." And I think from what you've seen in some of the last roadmaps is we've done a boatload. If you look at what we've done with the products over the last 10 years, It's a big, long list. It's a big, long list of some pretty major and aggressive things. So I've been really happy about it. I'm always really happy when I'm talking about the product here and all the things that we're working on, because we have a lot of people, very motivated, dedicated small talkers who basically they've dedicated their life to small talk, working at modernizing it. So I know everything's not always perfect, but the major things I think we're getting right. There's another question somewhere. Anik.
Yeah, I got lost between all your artists in the new movies. So could you? And I saw some message in the list which were comforting, like you said. We don't have what to use, and we need rules.
Part of that, when you're talking about the artists, is the infrastructure upgrade. UI2, which is one of our, it's my first or second most important thing on the list to address, and that's to get the full switchover done to Artist 2 so it's consistent, and it's also the foundation of bringing the two products together and introducing things like true native widgets, making that an option in VisualWorks. So yeah, we're unfortunately on some of those things, especially if you dive, if you do more than vanilla work under the surface, it's not completed yet. But that is on the list and top on the list for getting done. Other questions? Jerry.
I will follow up on Elliot's comment. I was not going to talk about it, but thank you. Can you elaborate on how Cincom is supposed to improve and make the Smalltalk language better and the Cincom Smalltalk ID better with shrinking workforce? And another question, can you elaborate on how the commitment that you mentioned earlier, that Cincom made some smart moves and smart investments, how it really is reflecting in the current situation in Cincom Smalltalk?
With your first question, what I can say is that workforce fluctuates up and down over time, and I mentioned that we like to have solid things to work on so we can employ as many as possible. Lots of people come and go for lots of different reasons. Your second thing, my point was that I think Cincom recognized the value in Smalltalk, and if you think Smalltalk is valuable, I think you'll agree. Maybe you're asking a different question, and we can follow up with that offline, but I think Smalltalk was valuable, so they invested in something they saw as valuable.
Well, I think my point is that they are disinvesting.
I don't see that.
Well, you just lost 4 senior engineers this spring for no apparent reasons that they may be too expensive or whatever. And I don't hold personal grudge. I was happy to be member of Cincom Smalltalk group. I think that any progress that Cincom Smalltalk made over the last number of years was not because of Smalltalk or not because of Cincom, it was in spite of it. And I think that the Cincom Smalltalk engineers are really the most dedicated group of people that I have ever worked with. And whatever anybody here has as complaint about missing documentation or missing features, it's not because of Cincom Smalltalk engineers. It's because Cincom, in my opinion, is not investing nearly enough.
I think that's your perspective, and I appreciate that. I'll reiterate what I said. that the workforce fluctuates up and down for a lot of reasons, and the two people representing for Smalltalk here, fight for every resource and try to increase it as much as possible.
I know that, and I would like, if you don't mind, my request is you guys to take this message back to your management. Because I don't think that